Am I on? All right. Skip has the most important quality in a board chair. He's not afraid to ask. Thank you, Skip, and I hope you'll heed his call. So let the record reflect that we're already behind schedule and it's not my fault. I'm going to time myself just so they don't try to cut me off too early. All right, what have we been up to? What are we trying to do? How are we going to move this state forward? A lot of you know who we are, established almost 40 years ago to be this unique voice, created by state government, but intentionally created to be outside the state, to bring sectors together. And you'll hear me talk a lot, see me talk a lot about how we collaborate. And I was thinking about the fact that, you know, we have an unfair advantage because we were created from inception in our structure and our DNA and our expectation and our mission to collaborate. Without that collaboration, we would be nothing. We've got this array of programs. We've got more programs than we have people. So how do we leverage this array of programming and the programs that we want to do, the initiatives, the research we need to do in order to move Maine's economy forward for the long term? In essence, it boils down to just these three things: leadership, trusted research, and cross-sector partnerships. And how we do the work matters. We're going to talk a lot about lunchtime, about how we do the work together during tough times in terms of civility. But I want to talk now about how we do the work in terms of looking to the objective research and building from a base of knowledge, whether we can stay true to a vision and be true to what the data tells us. As Harry Truman said, we just give you guys the truth. Sometimes you think it's hell. The Maine economic context requires brutal honesty and unquenchable optimism. I put this on a slide last month, and it was quoted in the newspaper. So like all you guys, I'm a sucker for positive reinforcement. I said, I guess I should use that slide again. Brutal honesty and unquenchable optimism. How do we bridge the gap between those two things to keep this state moving forward towards this vision? A high quality of life for Maine people that depends not just on great jobs, economic growth, but on vital communities and a healthy environment. Because any of these three without the others would be meaningless to all of us as a measure of our success in this state. Well, so we do, as you know, the Measures of Growth report with the Economic Growth Council every year. So first, the good news. And I'll use this as a stand-in. The Maine brand is real and it's powerful. And one element of that is our environmental quality. You can see Maine at the top of this bar in white compared to the nation. We are talking 95% of the highest quality bodies of water compared to the nation below 50. It's an exponential gap. How do we preserve that advantage and leverage it as a true asset for this state? And the same is true for air quality. Nobody would think of this one as being a gold star. The cost of doing business in this state, is it still higher than the nation? We are that white dotted line. Yes, it is. But we have a sustained 15-year downward trend line. And we have gotten more competitive in this high-cost region in which we compete in the Northeast than we have in a long, long time. We have to celebrate the march in the right direction. Okay, gold stars are one thing. Now what about the brutal honesty part? The red flags from the Measures of Growth report from this year. This one really troubles me. We are the dotted line in black at the bottom. One of the lowest states in America in terms of productivity, in terms of the value added for each worker in our economy. We can't legislate our way to prosperity. We have to produce value to earn our way to prosperity. How can we change that dynamic? 3 of the red flags this year were in education. Where are we in the 4th grade reading pipeline? Where are we in the 8th grade STEM pipeline? And where are we in equipping our population with post-secondary credentials and degrees to succeed? And I have to give a nod to our friends in industry here. I see Bowman Constructors here. I see my good friends from Chinbro who always remind me, our crane operators make more money than you'll ever dream about. Good point, Tim. Those post-secondary credentials that are not college degrees matter, and they matter a whole lot. They're just deucedly hard to track and compare to other states. We trail New England by 15 to 20 proportionately on this measure. We have to do something about that if we are to prosper. We have to invest in our people, plain and simple. Another red flag went to this, and this one is equally troublesome. We have to equip our people with the skills, and then we have to equip them with the tools. And the greatest tool of all is innovation. And yet, we lag the national average by a factor of 3 times. We lag the other EPSCoR states, which are other large rural states that have been handpicked by the federal government to try to stimulate additional research. We lag them. And this isn't just university and public sector dollars. It's critical that private industry be investing in R&D, that we encourage that investment, and that we attract research-intensive sectors to locate here in Maine. That's why we have Peter on our board, right, Peter? We have to create a climate for investment and innovation in Maine to change that productivity curve, to change our prosperity paradigm here in this state. How do we do those things? How do we leverage an array of programming at MDF to support that? And it comes back to these 3 things: leadership, trusted research, and creative cross-sector partnerships. Leadership Maine, our flagship program. We have gone now from Alpha to Omega, 24 years, over 1,000 alumni. As Skip said, we're going to need a new naming convention, so we'll be running a contest, get those ideas flowing. And I thought it would be a great way to illustrate what do we believe, what do we see about the potential of this state through the prism of a year of Leadership Maine. First, you engage in a bunch of silly activities to form a team, because you can't learn except as a team, and you can't lead except as a team. And some of it might be on that high ropes course where you conquer those demons and take those risks. And critically, never forget to thank the people that had you on belay during those risky journeys. So what did we see last year in Leadership Maine? We went to the Jackson Laboratory in Bar Harbor. And it's one thing to read about these things, but as you know, the magic of Leadership Maine is to see them and to touch them, and to understand what world-class research looks like, and to understand what medical genomics means in customized medicine, where they can be treating with 40 different regimens. They can be treating 40 tumors in mice with the exact DNA profile of your tumor in real time while you are undergoing treatment to say which one is going to work and which one is going to hold and avoid a relapse. We went and we saw CCAR, the aquaculture research facility of the University of Maine, and the federal facility right next door. They're peering in there to say, what are those fish? What are those fish? What is that next species that we can do not only ocean-based aquaculture, but even dry land-based aquaculture to commercial scale in this state, and use that R&D to take a traditional industry to the next level? And then we drove across the blueberry barrens with Dave Yarborough, who has spent 43 years trying to grow a better blueberry. The class was amazed by that. And to understand the innovation and the investment and the transformation of this industry, which has had to quadruple its productivity to remain competitive in today's world. Let me say that again. Quadruple the productivity of these blueberry barrens to remain competitive. And using GPS-guided, robotic, integrated pest management systems so that they can do more cheaper with less environmental impact, guided by some incredibly young, brilliant UMaine graduates that we met on our visit there. That's the little old Maine blueberry, innovation. And then we went down to Beals, to the Down East Institute for Applied Marine Research, trying to bring that same forward insight to how do we make a market to dramatically increase commercially viable shellfish cultivation in this state. Favorite line of the year for me, the guy said, the young research scientist there said, I was a stern man on a lobster boat, but I asked too many questions, so I had to become a marine biologist. Love it, love it. That's where the future is for this state. And then we saw UMaine Machias, and we saw some of the efforts to revitalize downtown Machias. We saw our friends at Axiom Technologies who are working on not only last mile broadband, but how do you build demand of how to use this thing in small businesses who have no capacity inside their 4 walls to leverage this technological transformation, and partnered to save the adult education program in Washington County. It was going to go down the tubes, but for a unique partnership between our friends at Maine Community Foundation and Axiom Technologies to forge this unique public-private approach to adult ed in Washington County. Great stuff. And then we drove into the ocean. I love this picture. At least that's what, it's kind of like what you do when you go to Lubec. You feel like you're driving into the ocean. And we sat at the Lubec School. Nothing in Maine tears the heart out of a community like the decision to close your school, to close your small high school in rural Maine. And yet Lubec, Maine had to make that decision. And the question is now, a few years later, how do you come back from that? How does a group of visionary locals reclaim that school building, make it a children's center, which is what we heard about, and bring the community back into a space that they were still, frankly, grieving to have lost? We got up the next morning and we went to Indian Township. And we heard amazing tales about what the tribes were doing to try to control and shape their own economic destiny. Their work in maple sugaring, their work with bottled water, their work in managing their wildlife as both a cultural asset and an economic asset. But what struck us was these pictures on the wall. I think there are 55 of them. And this is every tribal elder in a population of 1,200, because the public health challenges are so severe in this group, in this tribe, that only 55 of them lived to be elders. And we know the aging demographic in our state is going like that. What do we do about that? What do we do about that as a state and a people? And it was still under construction then, but yes, Virginia, there is a new paper mill that was just built and opened its doors here in Maine. Why don't we hear this story more often? This is the tissue mill in Woodland. And as dramatic as the capital investment was to create that facility and make it happen, an even bigger story which we heard is, how do you find the people that are work ready and have the skills? And we heard about the partnership between the community college and industry to find 60 workers, but the depressing thing was out of 400. What are we doing as a state to make sure those other 340 are equipped for that next opportunity after this one? And then we wrapped up our 3-day tour at UMaine. And I think, yes, we were impressed with the composite lab and advanced materials, but in some ways, we were even more impressed with the manufacturing center, where they are working with real innovators and real businesses with real ideas and current products and saying, how can we help you make that product or make that product better, cheaper, faster? This is real life stuff, not ivory tower stuff. So we took a little break, took a breather. The next month, we're at the Bates Mill in Lewiston, Auburn. You'll hear about this a little bit later. Bates Mill number 5, a building so big, 4 acres on each floor, that it gives you a sense of infinity better than infinity itself, and the vision that it takes to have developed millions of square feet of this process and take that risk. And one of those tenants, our favorite growing sector here in Maine, the craft and mid-sized brewing industry. The next month, we were in Portland, learning about the Portland waterfront, international trade, how the Gulf of Maine Research Center is supporting the aquaculture industry we learned so much about firsthand on the coast a few short months before. What is transforming these drivers of Maine's economy, and how do we understand them and win our fair share? What does it take to make policy? You learn so many things about the Maine's economy. How do you take that learning and say, what would it be like to be a freshman legislator, and we have a couple in the room, and go into that process and say, how do I take what I know about what the economy means and funnel it through the pressures and the stresses of a legislative process? Our favorite day of the year for all of our class members. We went to Western Maine, and Robin Zinchuk was our host. And we saw many cool things, but I think one of the things that impressed us the most is that innovation is everywhere you look. And we went to a small community ski area in Western Maine, Mount Abram, and what they are doing to innovate in a triple win situation. Yes, it's great for your image to invest in renewable and sustainable technology. But the fact is that electricity is the single biggest expense of running a ski area other than labor. And so it's a win-win for them to figure out how to control that cost to build a brand for their ski area that is truly unique and differentiated. Really cool stuff. And that was the takeaway for us. Innovation is everywhere. Innovation is everywhere. Not just at billion-dollar companies. Well, the ships are $1 billion. I won't say what the company is. Not just building billion-dollar ships, but innovation is everywhere. It was everywhere we went across rural Maine in those places that had the faintest hope of surviving and growing. That's what we learned through the prism of Leadership Maine. And all year long, as a Leadership Maine student, you are working on a project. There are many cool projects this year, but I'll signal out one of my favorites because the project itself lives what MDF is about. In fact, Seth Goodall, who's the head of the New England SBA, called me up and said, hey, I want to get together with you about that MDF project. I'm like, what project are you talking about? Turns out that the Leadership Maine project team was off and running with this thing. And they said, how do we make sure that these economic development professionals in the state actually understand enough about each other's resources to be meaningfully helpful to our small businesses and our entrepreneurs? They got 150 of these economic development professionals from all over the state together to do that peer learning, to do that crosswalk so that they could help entrepreneurs even better. And you see the partnership list there, which is what I love about this project. And then it's closing retreat. Hug it out. That's a wrap. Your Leadership Maine experience is done. We've got 1,000 leaders who have been through this kind of experience, who understand that risk-taking and vision and innovation are everywhere in Maine, and that growth and success only follows when they are there. So leadership, trusted research, and cross-sector partnerships. How do we live out these three things in some of the rest of MDF's important current work? I want to give you a little insight into how we take what a Leadership Maine class gets to see and apply it in our own work. Policy Leaders Academy, crucial to that. Probably the other most important way we develop leadership in this state is to be the trusted partner of legislative leadership and the state legislature. Have that relationship where we deliver to them programming when they're sworn in, programming on a bus tour, programming on sessions throughout the year to say, how do you apply these principles to your work as policymakers? And this year, as you've already heard, they begged us. Members of legislative leadership begged us to inject this component. Not because they said we're not civil with each other most of the time, but because this work is never done. It's like any other professional development. You have to keep plugging away at constantly being attuned to it and having reflective practice on it, because it's easy to be civil when the environment around you is easy. But how do you build the muscle for when the environment around you is hard? That's what this is about. We showed our leadership by partnering with the Economic Development Council of Maine and providing their agency services to try to bring synergy between our work and their work across the state, representing all the local economic development providers in Maine. We brought our principles of leadership to the work of how do we invest in people. Next Step Maine is a wonderful program, and it hinges on one simple insight, that if we are going to grow the skills and knowledge of our workforce, the fastest, most cost-effective way to start is with the adults who are already in our buildings as employers. How do we help them take that step towards more formal learning and to translate, if they dropped out of the education pipeline, to translate what they do have into a valuable degree or credential? This year, thanks to support from our friends at the Nellie Mae Foundation and others, we were able to offer twice as many scholarship awards to twice as many employers. And we have over 300 employers who are part of this network saying they're making this commitment, they're leveraging our tools and technical assistance, and they're getting discounts from a host of higher ed institutions across the state. Great, great stuff. This is old and new. And the new part is building off of our work with attracting young professionals to the state with the Realize Maine network and going further in partnership. How many of you guys think it would be great if you could get a state income tax credit while you're paying off your student loans. Up to $4,300 if you've got a bachelor's degree. Wouldn't that be great? How many of you think it'd be great if, guess what? Even if you went to school out of state, if you were enticed to bring that degree and its earning power here to the state, you could still qualify for that state income tax credit. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be a great recruiting tool? And wouldn't it be great if, as an employer, you could pay off the student debt for your employee and earn that income tax credit yourself as a business? Wouldn't that be great? Guess what? It already exists. Nobody knows about it. And so the question is, how can we elevate the profile of this program as it's been improved to really be a workforce attraction tool for the state of Maine? And a number of state agencies have already partnered with liveandworkinmaine.com to be this portal. I think about it simply this way. We have an Office of Tourism that attracts visitors. We have Maine & Company and Maine International Trade Center attracting business investment. Who's attracting the talent? And liveandworkinmaine.com is an effort, public-private, to do that Ed McCursey has launched. They are going to partner with us to promote the heck out of this EOTC, this Opportunity Tax Credit for College Loan Debt. And the Finance Authority of Maine is going to provide a lot of the higher touch counseling and assistance to people interested in this program. Let's make hay with this thing, people. We're already paying for it. How do we leverage the work we've been doing for the last 6 years in a series with the State Chamber called Making Maine Work? What's the next step? And one of the things we've identified in that series is this challenge that you all know about. That if we do nothing to change the future, that our workforce will shrink by some 20,000 in the coming years. And we articulated a goal with the State Chamber that we need that workforce to grow by about 45,000. And the numbers we've been crunching with OPM and Department of Labor suggest this is probably still roughly the right target zone, depending on our assumptions. We need to have a growing workforce in order to have growing businesses and a growing economy. How do we get there? As Jim and Skip said, one of the pieces has to be being welcoming to new Mainers. This, too, is not a silver bullet. Making Maine Work identifies 6 or 7 arrows we have to have in our quiver. We have to do a better job at creating workplaces where seniors want to keep working. We have to do a better job creating opportunities with people with disabilities to be in our workforce. We have to do a better job of supporting veterans who have various challenges in being employed and reemployed in our workforce. We have to do a better job across a whole host of things. But a big piece of that is attracting our fair share of new Americans. And get this, it's not pie in the sky. If we were to just match New Hampshire's rate of the total national immigration, we would double our share of immigrants coming to the state and generate 12,000 new workers over the next 5 years. Let's do it. This is the statistic that scares me the most. You can read a ton of statistics about the workforce and demographics, but at the end of the day, what this says is we need a combination of 50% more working age people or 50% higher productivity just to preserve the standard of living we have today in this state. How are we going to make that happen? Foreign born in the US, 13%. Maine, 3.5%. And here's the kicker. It wasn't always that way. In our own history, there were many junctures in time, going back even 50 years or so, where the percentage of foreign born in Maine was higher than the percentage in the country. And we reap the benefits in many of our iconic Maine businesses of those new arrivals. So we need a more comprehensive plan than that, though. As I said, new Mainers is just one piece of a much larger challenge, of a much larger pie that we need to bake together. So we need a comprehensive vision and plan for Maine. We need a statewide plan with clear goals, with high leverage strategies that we all can get behind. Industry, the state legislature, the higher ed delivery systems, K-12, and everyone else. And here's the beginnings of a kernel of that coalition, which has begun working over the last few months and is accelerating our work this fall. And what you see is partnership. The higher ed systems at the table is critical to this so that this is done with our friends in higher ed and not to our friends in higher ed, as we sometimes seem to do. How can we leverage this kind of partnership and build traction to something that will take hard work for a long period of time? And we couldn't do it without our supporters behind the scenes in the funding community. The partnership of people who are leading the charge in the business community and the delivery systems is one thing, but Maine is a small place and we need everybody at the table to move the work ahead. All right, well, that's workforce and education and investing in our people. What are we doing to create that climate for investment and innovation, and what more is on the horizon for us at MDF working with all of you? One place we're trying to spark that investment is in Maine's classic historic downtowns across the state, and we do that through the Maine Downtown Center, a public-private partnership between the state and MDF and a host of community and private players. And this is that network. About 30 communities who are formally involved in our work with the National Main Street Model, and dozens more who call us up and say, we need insight, we need help, we need best practices, where can we turn? And on here in the blue triangles, you see our newest partnership called Making Headway, where we partner with GrowSmart and the Sewell Foundation to really try to have a catalytic impact on that community conversation in some of Maine's most rural communities, where it's not always so obvious. Where do we turn to for that defining project or effort that will change the shape and the perception of our town? The return on investment is huge, 23 to 1. That's what I love about this program. That's what I loved about it when I was a private sector investor on behalf of Bangor Savings Bank. Grants to green, Skip mentioned 1.2, or is it 1.4? I can never remember. 1.2 million to over 40 projects across downtowns with support from our friends at the Maine Community Foundation and others, Efficiency Maine and others. I ran out of time to put everybody's logo on every slide, but I think you get the message about what collaboration looks and feels like for us at MDF. Making Headway, I mentioned, again, we couldn't do the work unless we were doing the work together with the resources, the funders, and the partners. And finally, when the downtown center itself was in an hour of need this year and really needed to reassess our own footings and figure out how we make sure the downtown center remains viable as a public-private partnership and remains sustainable, we turned to our friends at the Betterment Fund and others, and we were so grateful that they heeded the call and gave us the resources to create a true strategic plan for how to keep the great work moving forward. So we thank them for that. So finally, this thing on the forest economy. Holy moly. I see my great new friend, Patrick Strauch from the Maine Forest Products Council is here front and center. Thank you, Patrick, for being here. This is not an easy one. To pick up the phone and say, we've lost 6 paper mills, we've lost 5,000 or 6,000 jobs in just 2 years in this sector, and the federal government will help you out. This is not a sector populated with a lot of guys that are prone to believe that narrative, right, Patrick? But the question was, look, how could we make the most of this moment? How could we make the most of this opening that Maine's congressional delegation commitment had given us? Something truly unique, a site visit from the feds to try to create a coordinated understanding and therefore a coordinated response, only done 30 times in their history, usually done in the aftermath of a natural disaster. How could we do it for an industry that is still here and is trying to find its footings for the future? 6 paper mills down, mostly in the Penobscot Valley, biomass generation under duress with massive shifts in the marketplace. No paper being made in Penobscot Valley for over 100 years since that was the case. This is landmark in our lifetimes. And yet, when you start to dig beneath the covers, this is an industry that grew to almost $10 billion in our state in recent years, and despite its decline, is still $8.5 billion this year. That is huge. How do we understand the narrative behind where this industry is going, and not only protect those 33,000 jobs that are here today, but grow some of them back? What's important to understand is where the hits are coming. Almost 60% of the market demand, primarily in softwood and in low-value biomass, went away. 3 to 4 million tons of demand went away. And so we have this enormous hit we've taken as a state, but we have this enormous opportunity. And how do we create something that can fill that over our horizon? So we said, hey, welcome to Maine, feds. If you can help us try to make something of this challenge and the discussion. And importantly, the 4 trade associations in the industry all joined forces to make this happen. We took them across a broad swath of the state. They saw a lot of things. They saw every part of the supply chain. They saw small woodlots. They saw communities reeling from having that anchor industry ripped out of their community economically and psychologically. And they saw, and an important part of our objective, they saw the leading lights of who were the survivors and who were the innovators and where is the future going in this industry in Maine. Who's making it happen? They saw the 7th largest paper mill in the world and the investments in innovation and technology and productivity that make that possible, which you're going to hear a little bit more about this morning. No amount of federal money ever turned a bad plan into a good plan. And the realization right out of the gate is this isn't just an opportunity to try to grasp for a few extra federal dollars. This is an opportunity to get our act together, to take some of the pieces that are in play and make a more coherent whole out of them and work like hell together as a state towards a common objective, maybe with a little extra federal money to grease the skids. Other regions have developed a vision for how to move their forest products sector forward. Why not Maine? Where's our vision? Where's our plan? And if we can help the players in this sector develop that, that is what we were built for, and that is what hopefully we can bring to the table. They've already articulated some of those key principles. Forestry consulting to understand global wood markets, and importantly, which of those wood markets can Maine take advantage of. Really understanding in a dynamic, multi-decade, forward-looking way what our inventory is and where our forests are going. Synthesizing that into a true vision for the sector, and having a marketing plan driven by that, that will continue to increase our ability through Maine & Co., through DECD, through MITSE, to attract investors into the sector to growth opportunities. Trusted research, in other words. How do we develop a vision for this sector that is built on trusted research? Other action items, transportation systems, markets for residuals, a more clear focus and strategy on leveraging biomass and combined heat and power. In other words, it's not just growing the forest products industry. We can help grow any industry that can leverage the outputs of our forest economy. Who uses that power? Who uses that heat? We can grow it. And to stay focused on our comparative advantage. Of the opportunities set out there, we have to push ourselves, and I think our keynoter will speak to this in a few minutes. How do we leverage those opportunities where being close to the East Coast markets and Europe is a competitive advantage? How do we leverage the fact that we've already conserved 4 million acres of forest land in this state? How do we leverage the fact that we have a higher percentage of our forest land certified sustainable than any other place on the continent? How do we leverage those comparative advantages? And how do we change the narrative about this industry so we get excited about the innovation here as much as we get excited about the innovation at Jackson Lab and the innovation in aquaculture and the innovation in IT here in our state? And it's going to come from players like the University of Maine, like the new coalition, Bio-Based Maine, that is focused on these markets. And you can pretend to learn the terms of things like cellulosic nanofibrils and lavulinic acid. But where are we going? It's not about paper. It's not just about lumber. It's about anything that can be made with wood fiber. Where do we take this? And we're making progress on these fronts. And we have to get excited about this progress, double down, and make the right investments in this future. That's what our partnership is about with the industry, with you, Maine, and with the communities. What do we do for these communities that have been devastated. They are a critical part of this initiative too. They were part of the visit. They were part of the brief outs. They are part of the planning. And so how do we take their common themes that transcend the needs of any individual community and build a support system for nurturing those entrepreneurs, investing in the basic infrastructure around digital and broadband, developing them as destination places, and indeed having them help the industry with its next step forward. So assets and leadership and vision create our opportunity. How do we leverage 1,000 leaders that we've equipped with some of those core insights and empower you more to make these changes happen? How do we take these leaders who are on belay for each other and on belay for the state of Maine and harness that talent? How we do it matters. Steered by a vision, steered by these core efforts in leadership, trusted research, and cross-sector partnerships. We think you can get a hell of a long way towards the vision with those three things. What do you think? Will you join us in pursuing this vision for Maine with leadership, trusted research, and with partnership? Are you with us? Yes. We're going to keep doing the work. And now we get to honor some people who are already doing it. And I'd like to invite up to present our first Champion of Economic Development Award, Commissioner of Labor, Jean Paquette. Jean?